Hello and welcome to another episode of Live Mindfully with Laurie Moore. By now we know that bringing a little mindfulness into our day can help us go a long way. So if you haven't started to consider how 2023 is going to look for you, this is your gentle reminder. And this isn't going to be another one of those goal-setting podcasts. No. In this episode, I'm asking whether 2022 has been the kind of year in its totality that you were hoping for. And if it wasn't, what is the intention you are setting for 2023? At the end of every year, I set an intention for the year ahead. Simply put, an intention is a guiding principle for how you want to be, live, and show up in the world. And when you set an intention for the year ahead, you are making a commitment to yourself to bring about a course of action intended to improve your life. In 2021, I set the intention of contentment for 2022. 2021 had felt like a turbulent year for me. I often felt overwhelmed, too busy, and very stressed. We as a family had far too many weekly commitments. I felt like I had very little downtime, and I was not in a hurry for 2022 to look the same. I wanted to feel in flow. Release once and for all my ingrained beliefs around work and family, and in particular, other people's thoughts, feelings, and opinions about how I was living my life. I wanted to be happy and I wanted to be content. And I understood that in order to achieve this, I would need to slow down and I would need to get very comfortable with saying no. And I was able to make these realizations by asking myself 3 simple questions. And every year, these are the same 3 questions I pose to myself to discover what my intention for the following year is. The first question: when did I feel at my absolute best this year? Question 2: when did the worst version of myself show up and why? And question 3, how do I want to feel in 2023? So this doesn't need to be something you spend a lot of time on. You, of course, can. There is nothing stopping you from turning this into a beautiful practice where you can make your favorite beverage, light a candle, pull out your journal, and sit in stillness. But you can also do this one evening once the kids are in bed, or early in the morning, or really at any time during the day where you've got around 15 minutes of quiet. Because it's really hard to unjumble our thoughts when there's a lot going on around us. So you want to find somewhere quiet. And this really is the first step. And I do recommend having a pen and pad just to jot down some ideas that come into your mind. I tend to find that my mind can either go radio silent, it's like my brain says to itself, oh God, it's our time to shine and I can't remember anything. Or my brain says, it's our time to shine. Quick, shove as many memories in front of her as humanly possible before we forget them all. So I find it really helpful to have something to write on if I need it. And then we start with question 1. We get nice and still, make sure you're comfy, and make sure you feel calm. And this week I'm going to include a quick 5-minute guided meditation just to help you center. So that'll be loaded separately within this podcast and is there for you to use for this practice or whenever you need it. It's also perfect for calming your nerves right before a big event. So once you're calm and sitting in silence and sitting in stillness, start by thinking of one thing that happened in 2022 that made you feel so grateful. It has to be something that brings a smile to your cheeks and a gentle warmth to your belly. Perhaps you got that job promotion, or took a holiday with your family, or left a toxic relationship, or maybe you met someone. Whatever it is, it can be big or small. Maybe you've overcome an illness and you're just thankful that every morning your eyes open, something we all take for granted. My grandfather always said, no day is promised. Every day is a gift. And then begin to feel into the thing that you're grateful for. Think about where you were and what was happening around you at that time. Then begin to become aware of the calming sensation that washes over you when you are in this state. And then allow your mind to expand toward other experiences throughout the year that enhance this feeling of gratefulness for you. Times when you felt at your absolute best. What were you doing in these moments? Who were you with? And where were you? And most importantly, how did you feel? What words would you use to describe this state? And these are the words you want to write down, because these are the feelings you want to bring more of into your life in 2023. And then once you've done that, we have to explore the flip side of this by bringing into our mind the experiences, times, and events where you didn't show up as your best self. And let me just be honest, I have had a number of experiences this year that I can think of off the top of my head where I did not show up as my best self. And everyone does. Everyone does. And the worst part about our minds is that it is usually easier to think of times when we have not behaved as our best selves, and much harder to think of examples where we are really thankful to ourselves. So it's likely that question 2 will come a little easier than perhaps question 1 did. And when we start to think about times where we did not show up as our best selves, I'm not necessarily talking about when things didn't go your way, like you lost that job or that project fell through or something bad happened. I want you to more focus on times when you don't feel like you showed up to a situation, any situation, as your best self. Times where you were embarrassed about how you acted. Times where you really scolded yourself because you could have handled things better. Times when the worst possible version of yourself showed up. So these are things like perhaps you had an argument with your partner and instead of stating your point of view, you became really nasty and name-called or gave them the silent treatment for 5 days. Maybe you spent a lot of 2022 yelling at your kids or being frustrated by how much you needed to work. Perhaps this year you didn't have as much time or money as you needed, and that made you difficult to be around. Maybe you can recall specific events where all you did was complain, or perhaps you drank more than you would have liked, or engaged in behaviors that really are not A, who you are, or B, who you want to be. And I don't want to get too bogged down in this feeling, especially because sitting in this space is so unhealthy for us mentally. But this is a valuable step. If you listened to episode 1 from last week, then you will remember that reflection is so important. Firstly, in helping us to become more mindful, but also in helping us to become better versions of ourselves. So when we come to reflecting on question 2, we want to think about when did the worst version of myself show up? And then we want to tie that into the feelings and emotions that carried through in those moments. Was it sadness, anger, frustration, jealousy? And then which of those emotions would you prefer to feel less of? And you're likely to say all of them. And yes, of course, I agree with you. But one of these emotions is going to have presented more often throughout the year than the others. And these are the ones that we want to jot down. And then we want to take a beat. Have a look at the positive feelings you've written down and have a look at the negative. And which ones really stand out to you. So what we're essentially doing in this moment is saying to ourselves, what do I want more of in my life? And what do I want less of? And this will then bring us to question 3. How do you want to feel in 2023? So let's jump back to my 2021 example. I felt my absolute best when I was at home with my family and things were calm and stable. I felt like the worst version of myself when I had way too much going on, including home, family, work, and social commitments. I also noticed that when I got caught up in drama, I wasn't able to safely and consciously extract myself without it having a pretty big impact on me mentally. Now, the truth is, there were some things outside of my control. For instance, we were only in our 3rd year of business, so my husband had to work a lot, which meant that a lot of the household chores were my responsibility, and it also meant that I was, and still am, the primary carer of our children. So when I looked at what might need to change to marry into how I wanted to feel, I needed to be honest with myself. Because the thing that was in my control was how many commitments I had each week. And if I wanted to have that overarching feeling of contentment, that would mean I would need to start saying no, where I would have previously said yes. Now, I want to be very honest here and say, well, I wish I could say I made this declaration in 2021 and everything was smooth sailing from there. Like I said, I want to be content and boom, it just happened. That was not the case. Unfortunately, when I started to say no to things, I had to first navigate my own feelings of FOMO, like big time. And I also had to navigate how some people responded, especially those around me who were not used to me saying no. Sometimes people got angry. I was made to feel guilty about my choices. In one instance, I had someone tell me they were disappointed in me. And more often than I expected, I was asked, why? Well, why can't you come? Or why can't you do that thing for me? Because I had operated in a certain way up until this point, people had built expectations around how I would behave, and I was changing that. And so I want you to be prepared for that. But I also want you to remember that when you set an intention for yourself, it's likely that the intention you set is something you either do not currently have, something you are not currently doing, or something you want more of. So in order to achieve said thing, you are going to have to make some changes, and more than likely these changes are going to impact the people around you. But rarely do we make changes in our lives that are bad for us, especially when we come to those decisions from a place of stillness and reflection. Intuitively, we are our own best friends. And yes, we can also be our own worst enemies, but when we make time for quiet and can turn our focus inward, we always seem to know what we really need. And eventually those around you will come to accept your new way of doing things, and you will also become more comfortable in doing things in a different way to meet your intention. So once you have how you want to feel in 2023, you can set your intention. And you do this by simply stating, my intention for 2023 is to feel more, and then you add whatever it is. Maybe it's to feel content or financially stable, more connected to your partner, more engaged with work. Maybe you want to feel more free. And once you set that intention and you say it out loud, it's like you've made this commitment to yourself and to the universe. In fact, I do this little ritual every year where I write my intention on a little piece of paper. And I carry this with me on New Year's Eve. And at the stroke of midnight, I say it out loud and then I burn it. And I also usually burn the tip of my fingers. That's just how that goes. But it's like you send it off into the universe. And the practice of intention setting isn't just some woo-woo practice. Science has proven that actually having an intention, particularly one that we repeat and reinforce to ourselves over and over, will actually change the composition of the brain and in particular shift our neural pathways, because the brain is an organ that is built to change according to our experiences. We are really adaptable creatures. And the reason we want to create an intention based on a feeling is because our emotions drive our behaviors. So the act of intention setting with an emotion programs a new experience for our brain, while also making us more accountable to ourselves and allowing us to feel like we are taking back control of our life. And when we feel like we are in the driver's seat, we make more empowered decisions for ourselves and our families, and we live in alignment with what actually makes sense for us. And once we have our intention, then we start to think about our goals and how they can align with that intention, and what changes we are going to need to make for our intention to thrive. Our intention setting also encourages us to let others live their lives how they want to. We, in general, have more respect, compassion, and understanding because we understand that those around us are also trying to live out their intention. And never in the history of this world will that be a bad thing. So let's recap. The 3 questions that you need to ask yourself are: when did I feel at my absolute best in 2022? When did the absolute worst version of myself show up and why? And how do I want to feel in 2023? You can do this with a journal or just a small piece of paper and 15 minutes of your time. Listen to the guided meditation if you need, and come back as often to this episode if you need further clarification. Happy intention setting for 2023. I hope it's an experience that brings you joy and makes you feel more in control of the year ahead. As self-help author and motivational speaker Wayne Dyer says, our intention creates our reality. If you have loved this episode, please share it across your social media accounts, follow, rate, and review. I'll see you next week. Until then, take good care of yourself.